Good afternoon and welcome to our webinar on the Regional Early Action Planning Grants and Technical Assistance Opportunities. I'm Melissa Keene. I will be your moderator for today. Just have a few housekeeping items before we jump into the content of the presentation. Here's a quick overview of today's agenda. We have a welcome and some logistical information to share with you all, and then we'll have an introduction from the team. We'll go through an overview of the REAP program. And then we'll specifically talk about REAP in the San Joaquin Valley. We're going to do a quick overview of some technical assistance options for you all, and then we're going to do some instant polling to really get some feedback from all of you on the line as to what will be most helpful for your region. Then we're going to dig a little bit deeper into some of the regional technical assistance that's available to you all. We'll have some time for Q&A, and then we'll talk about wrap-up and next steps. You probably have noticed that you are all muted, and you will stay muted for the duration of the call given the size of the audience today, but that doesn't mean you can't ask us questions. If you have a question at any point in time during the webinar, please type that into the questions box you see in the control panel of your screen. We'll be monitoring that throughout, and again, we will have time. We have a couple of places held for questions, and we'll definitely get to as many questions as possible at the close of this webinar. To give you an idea of who your presenters and your technical assistance team on the line today, you see this up on your screen. So your regional technical assistance team is comprised of Michael Segala, the Fresno COG, and today we have Robert Phipps on the line, Mintier Harnish and Ramey and Associates from HCD. We have Sohab and Marissa on the line to answer any questions related to the grant program. Your PlaceWorks team is Sarah and Allison. And then I'm Melissa Keene, and my colleague Carly Brown is on the line from the Institute for Local Government. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Michael and Robert to kick us off.
Okay, Robert, do you want me to go first?
Yeah, that's fine. Go ahead, Michael.
Hi, Michael Segala here, Segala Inc., based out of Fresno Clovis area. Thank you for joining us today. This is a very instrumental and important step forward in terms of the Valley accessing and using a lot of resources that haven't been here in the past for regional planning efforts and jurisdictional planning efforts related to housing. So you'll learn about the funding available. That's the most important thing, and Robert will cover that in a little bit. Funding available to the Valley and this represents really a unique opportunity for partnership and leveraging and flexibility and a time to do things that you typically wouldn't have the time or resources for in your community. So San Joaquin Valley is an important part of the state, fastest growing region always, and with the new things such as COVID and telecommuting, it's obviously getting impacted with housing and lack of housing harder than it has in the past. So the timing's right to implement some of these new innovative strategies to help you out. And so on behalf of the 8 counties, San Joaquin Valley, and all the MPOs, thank you again, and I'll turn it over to Robert.
Thank you, Michael. Yeah, my name is Robert Phipps. I am the Deputy Director with Fresno Council of Governments, and Fresno COG is serving as the fiscal agent for the San Joaquin Valley REAP effort, to the REAP program. And we welcome each and every one of you. Thank you all for coming. We really appreciate your interest in this and hope to be able to illuminate today the similarities between, primarily between the LEAP and the REAP programs, how they interact, and that, you know, what are some of the differences as well. And so, again, we encourage questions. We know that you're a little limited in terms of, because of the size of the group, by having to use the chat function, but we hope that you will use that early and often, and hope to hear from you your comments and thoughts, and of course any questions or concerns. And with that, I'll give it back to Melissa. So thank you.
Great, thank you, Michael and Robert. Next, we're going to hear from HCD, and they're going to give you a little bit of an overview of the REAP program. Marissa?
Great, thank you. So hi everyone, I'm Marissa Frossi. I'm a policy analyst with HCD and a liaison to the San Joaquin Valley for REAP. And I'm excited to join you all today. So I'm here to present on the big picture of REAP at the state level. So REAP provides flexible technical assistance and planning grants due to the new challenges for jurisdictions to meet the new regional housing needs assessments. This funding is here to help and should ultimately lead to better planning, better sites, and more of the development our communities desperately need. Next slide. And then the next one. Yeah. Great. So increasing the availability of affordable homes statewide is critical to bettering the quality of life of all Californians and to ending homelessness. So with this in mind, in the 2019-2020 Budget Act, Governor Gavin Newsom allocated $250 million for all regions, cities, and counties to do their part by prioritizing planning activities that accelerate housing production to meet identified needs of every community. With this allocation, HCD established the Regional Early Action Planning Grant Program with $118.7 million going to regions. For cities or counties, the Budget Act also created a planning grant program specifically for cities and counties that is called the Local Early Action Planning Grants, or LEAP, which covers the other half of that $250 million, which I'm sure is familiar to many in attendance today. If we could go back to the previous slide, I think we jumped it. But I'll go over kind of what is the purpose of REAP. So this program allows councils of governments and other regional entities to collaborate on projects that have a broader regional impact on housing. Grant funding is intended to help regional entities and governments facilitate local housing production that will assist local governments in meeting their regional housing need allocation. REAP provides one-time funding in the form of planning grants to councils of governments, multi-agency working groups, as is the case for the San Joaquin Valley, and some small rural counties to prepare, adopt, and implement planning documents and process improvements that, first, accelerate housing production, and second, facilitate or help local governments facilitate compliance in implementing the 6th cycle of the Regional Housing Needs Assessment. So next, I'll go over some key dates on the next slide. So first up, the Notice of Funding Availability, the NOFA, was released on February 26th for full application, so almost a full year ago. Next, we entered the over-the-counter period. So the final due date for applications was January 31st, 2021, but it is an over-the-counter process, which means the applicant can continue to edit and update the application in consultation with HCD. The San Joaquin Valley Working Group submitted an application and is currently working with HCD staff to refine in the over-the-counter process. As some of the individual COGs are still finalizing how their allocated funds will be spent, we expect for revisions to continue for the next little while. Later in this presentation, Michael and Robert will provide more detail on the San Joaquin Valley's application and give an overview of eligible uses. So technical assistance for the program is also ongoing. HCD has been providing technical assistance since REAP was announced, and in collaboration with the technical assistance consultant team, we will continue to do so through December 2023. And then lastly, the expenditure deadline. So the date to expend all your grant funds is December 31st, 2023. In this case, most projects should be invoiced by August 2023. This is needed due to the time it can take to process invoices. So with that, I'll stop here as Robert and Michael will give more detail on the San Joaquin Valley's REAP application. Unfortunately, I won't be able to stay for the entirety of the webinar due to another conflict, but my HCD colleagues on the call should be able to answer any questions you might have, and my email is provided at the end of the presentation if you have any following questions following today's webinar. So thank you for having me today, and with that, I'll turn it back over to Robert and Michael.
Okay, thank you. So next slide, Melissa, please. Right, so REAP was established by virtue of AB 101, part of the Budget Act back in 2019, which granted nearly $19 million to the entire San Joaquin Valley region in the Regional Early Action Planning Funds, again, separate and distinct from the Local Early Action Planning Funds that went directly on a pro rata basis to each jurisdiction in the Valley. The statute required specifically that a 24-member San Joaquin Valley REAP committee for housing to be established to determine how this funding would be broken up. Michael?
Okay, so as you see on the bottom, the funding, the $19 million coming to the Valley by statute is coming through the MPOs, the COGs of the San Joaquin Valley. So from San Joaquin County in the north to Kern County in the south. So that's how it's sort of flowing. It's a new type of program, and so we're trying to work through it all at this time, and we have a plan that we're going to present to you. Next slide, please. So here's the REAP committee for housing. So this the statute in AB 101 required that every county have 3 appointees to a working group, and the working group sort of guides the policy and the funding allocations. This working group that you see on the screen consists of a member of the COG for each county. It consists of a member of the largest city, and it consists of a small city representative. So this 24-member committee has already met 3 times since last year and helped us with the initial formation of the policies and funding moving forward. So if you're in any of these counties, those are the people that are most in touch with what's going on with this flow of money here in the Valley. Next slide, please. So here's the major work areas for the San Joaquin Valley REAP process. It's in 3 main areas, and the first one is RENA, and that's typically a MPO type activity gets flowed down to the city. So the state is providing funding and support to help in that RENA process for the next 6 cycle of the housing elements. And the state and the region are looking to sort of for new ways to allocate and distribute those housing allocations. So this is going to require additional support from the state, and that's why there was money allotted for this effort. The next category is sub-allocations to jurisdictions. Now, this is the biggest part of the REAP process. We'll show you in the next slide, but this is the biggest chunk of money. And so this is why it's important that folks on the phone here today are part of this workshop, because it will provide grants to accelerate housing and to align with the state's planning priorities, but there's a lot of flexibility and a lot of activities that we'll cover. And so we think this is pretty important to help you do a lot of things that maybe were not funded in the past, or things that you wanted to do like ADUs or those types of things that you didn't have time or resources for. So an important part of money there in the middle. On the bottom is valley-wide work effort. So again, this is new. Typically, all 8 counties, don't work together as a region all the time. And in this case, the state gave the San Joaquin Valley up to $6 million more than other regions to work together to sort of address these housing issues from a regional perspective. And so Robert and I are primarily working in that category on the bottom. And right now we have Mateer Harnish and Ray Mean Associates working on a comprehensive housing report that will provide the background for existing conditions, policies, strategies, barriers, and other items moving forward as a region in terms of housing. And then there's other pots of money that are available to help set up regional house trust funds, technical assistance, and a host of other activities. We'd like to hear from you today to help us identify what those other potential activities are that could be beneficial to you. And of course, it includes the administration and other sort of project management duties. Next slide.
Next slide, please. Right. So as far as the funding distribution, the way that it's working is that, again, Fresno COG is serving as the designated fiscal agent, because the Valley does not have a, there is not one MPO as in several other regions of the state that covers the entire San Joaquin Valley. It is 8 separate metropolitan planning organizations. So Fresno COG is serving on behalf of the entire Valley as the fiscal agent. There have been a total of 3 applications. The first 2 were consolidated into one funding distribution. that's mentioned in the first bullet here, the 10.2 million. And then the final round, which was submitted as Marissa mentioned, the 8.7 million in the third application. As the distribution of the entire amount is shown below, based on each county's pro rata share, and then with the carve out for the valley-wide work activities that Michael mentioned, the first of which is the valley-wide comprehensive report, for which the consultants that you'll be meeting have already been hired. Some of the other activities in that will come out of that pot of money will include primarily technical assistance. There's potential for establishing a housing trust fund and a variety of other valley-wide activities potentially. So we haven't decided exactly how all that will be, what all will be funded yet, but we are working on that. And of course, we'll be accepting taking guidance from that the REIT committee or the working group. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, here are some of the activities that we've talked about using the both the valley-wide and the sub-regional shares for, again, with the emphasis on improving the RHNA 6-cycle RHNA methodology and improving access to housing and specifically affordable housing. We've talked about the notion of a regional housing trust fund, that is a valley-wide housing trust fund, at least establishing one, streamlining the development process, helping to plan and to coordinate a regional project pipeline, and supporting local jurisdictions impacted by COVID-19. And this can include up to and including funding support for staff time. Not all the work has to be done by consultants, for example. So that's an important point. So as we note, some of the highlighted activities are to be conducted on the jurisdictional level, and some are implemented on behalf of or by the COGs themselves. Each region, it's important to understand that each region is handling the way in which it suballocates to the member jurisdictions slightly differently. Some are doing it on a pro rata basis. Others are doing it on a competitive basis, and still others kind of on a regional, priority basis. And so you'll just need to contact your COG and get in touch with your individual COG as to how that is occurring.
Right. Let me just add a couple of things here. So each COG gets a pot of money that you saw in the previous slide. They keep some of it for RHNA, and they sub-allocate most of it to the jurisdictions. But that sub-allocation is different per county. So that's why your communication, cooperation, coordination with your MPO is very important. So on this slide, San Joaquin County is keeping some of the money for sort of county-wide activities, and then they're allocating some of it to their jurisdictions. Fresno COG, the bottom bullet point, is opted for a competitive process. Robert, can you say a couple of words about Fresno COG's process on allocating their money to their cities?
Sure. So Fresno COG, much like it does with its transportation funding, it's federal transportation, like its surface transportation block grant and congestion mitigation air quality money. We use a competitive process where the jurisdictions submit their projects, with the following the state criteria. Our criteria for this process is the same as the states, and then those projects are ranked by a peer committee of jurisdictional staff, and then funded to the extent that we have funding available. So again, it's kind of important to note that right now, we have only the first allocation that is available to us. The previous slide that you saw was the total amount, but we have not yet received that final allocation of the 8 million, which will not be distributed on an advanced basis the way the first 10.2 million was provided. And so we're going to need to work our way through that first 10.2 million, which includes the valley-wide activities as well. At least part of that before we can begin requesting additional funds through this process. But like we said, each COG is doing it slightly differently because each COG is receiving a different amount. And so it's just that communication with your COG is very, very important.
Next slide, please. Okay, so here are some of the ways that REAP funds funds can be used, and it's very similar to LEAP that you're familiar with. Everybody in the valley except 3 jurisdictions apply for LEAP, so I know you have some familiarity there. Again, so RENA and housing element plan activities are eligible. Again, all these funds are going to be available within the next 6 months, more or less, from the COGS to the cities, and then you have until August 2023 to use it. So housing element support is an option. Again, the COGS may opt to use some of that money for county-wide technical assistance and other activities. Cost of administration is borne by the COG. And then the sub-allocations. So that's the big chunk of money everywhere is the sub-allocations to the cities for technical assistance in improving your housing permitting processes, tracking systems and planning tools, facilitating technical assistance between jurisdictions. Again, you can establish regional or county-wide housing trust funds. We can decide as a San Joaquin Valley, we want to have multiple county trust fund. We're not quite there yet, but we need your input. Performing infrastructure planning, sewer, water systems, transit roads, other public facilities needed to support new housing. So this is important. I know lack of water and water system development is very key in a lot of our cities here in the valley. So having money to do that is uncommon. Feasibility studies to determine the most efficient locations to site housing, feasibility studies for housing projects on surplus properties, and covering the costs of temporary staff and consultants needed to do these activities. So again, this is not an exclusive list. This is most of the money can be used for this list, but I think, just like LEAP, you need to talk to HCD to figure out if other activities you had in mind are okay as well, as long as they improve housing production in your city or county, then I think it's probably on the table. Next slide, please. And these are ineligible uses of REAP funds. So again, everything needs to be related to housing production, planning documents related to housing productions. You can't, obviously the state is very interested in pro-housing type of activities, so you can't do it to sort of obstruct or take away land for housing or anything like that, or restrict housing. Capital financing, this is a question we get a lot. If we do a housing trust fund, can we use the money for capital? And the answer is these are planning funds. So, and it's inherently a planning activity. You can use the funds to completely set up a housing trust fund, but you can't finance the housing trust fund with this money. You could use the funds to analyze and implement a fee waiver or reduction program in your inner city, but you can't use the funds to augment that fee reduction. And then administrative costs of persons employed for the grantee for activities not associated with this grant are not allowed as well. So those are just some of the ineligible uses. And again, you can either look to your COGS. They will establish policies at their board level for eligible uses, priorities, and allocations to cities and county. Next slide, please.
Right. So Michael and I are basically working as the leads. Michael is the Valley-wide program manager for REAP, and he is under contract with Fresno COG, again, as the fiscal agent. So I am serving as the Valley-wide program manager on the COG staff level. So you're welcome to contact either one of us with your information. I know we can make these slides and this presentation available after the fact. Next slide, please. And then again, specifically, we encourage you to interact very closely with your COGS, because one of the big questions we anticipate is how can we leverage REAP to interact with the LEAP funds that you probably have already received or are in the process of receiving. And of course, that's going to vary based on how your COG is suballocating the REAP funds. And so, before you is the listing of the contacts with whom we are regularly working on a monthly basis from each COG to get those monies out the doors to you. Again, whether it's directly a direct suballocation on like a pro rata basis, or through some sort of competitive program. But each COG will decide that for itself through its board process, through its normal processes. And so these are the contacts. And again, we can certainly make all of this information available after this presentation. And so I think at this point, Melissa, we were going to pause to see if there were any questions that we could answer before we move into the polling.
Sure, we
Yes,
just have one. Oh, sorry, and you may have already answered this, but I just want to put a fine point on it. The question is, how do we receive reimbursements for invoices for project time or costs during the last 3 months of the program timeline or program time period? So they're looking for costs like consultants or city council adoption. What is the process by which they can receive reimbursements?
So again, on the REAP side of the equation, that will depend on the arrangement, that the COG has with the individual jurisdiction. It depends on, there would be either an actual contract or some sort of MOU that would presumably be established. I know in Fresno COG's case, we have the option of administering contracts on behalf of the jurisdictions in certain cases, if the jurisdictions would like us to do that. So there are any number of ways that could occur. In theory, some of the funds could be allocated in advance, but again, that's going to be up to each individual COG. But yes, the 3-month timeline is kind of important, because while this program does not technically end until I think it's December of 2023, there is a 90-day period by which all products must undergo a public review. And that again is spelled out in both the guidelines and in the statute, as I recall. And so really the cutoff, as Michael mentioned, is the end of August 2023, that all work product must really be completed and all deliverables out for public review. So the December timeframe is kind of the point at which it's getting to the end of the invoicing period. So it is important to keep those deadlines in mind. I hope that answers the question. I don't know if HCD wants to chime in on that.
I'm not sure if this question was getting at the REAP program or maybe even the LEAP program. If you were asking about LEAP reimbursements, you can just email our team at earlyactionplanning@hcd.ca.gov, and we can tell you how to invoice for reimbursements if you are asking about your LEAP grants.
Great, thank you both. That's the only question so far.
Just 2 quick logistical things before we move into the discussion about the statewide regional technical assistance. If you do have a question, just a reminder to go ahead and drop that into the questions box on your control panel. Like we just paused for questions, we'll be taking additional questions throughout the webinar, so please drop those in as they come up. And then second, just to close the loop on Robert's comment, yes, we will be distributing the slide deck after the webinar to all of the registrants, so keep an eye out for that. So no need to frantically write down all of these phone numbers and email addresses. We will be distributing this to you all for your records after the call.
Thanks, Melissa. And actually, I do have one more question if we have the time. The question is August 31st, 2023 deadline for the local jurisdictions to provide final invoicing to the COGS, or is it a deadline for all final invoices to be submitted to HCD.
The August 31st, correct me if I'm wrong, the August 31st is when the work product would have to be completed. That's when it needs to be out the door. The invoicing can come later after that, as I recall.
So Robert, I think you have it a little bit flipped, but close. So August 31st, 2023, you want to start having those final invoices into HCD so we can have that 90-day period to reimburse you for those costs. Now, in your standard agreements and part of our guidelines is you can still be working on finishing the last pieces of your project until December, but you really want to make sure you have that project complete by December. So usually those last pieces are adoption, making sure it's all taken care of with council, you're wrapping it up, you're just getting to that final piece. So reimbursement should happen, or submitting your final invoices should happen by August 31st, 2023. You should have that project complete, ideally by December 2023. Hopefully that cleared up that question.
Great, thanks. So how about
I can add just real quick there. Our expenditure deadline for the money is December 31st, 2023. In order for us to process payments, we need a runway. So that's why you see that deadline. And that's why Sohab and Robert are talking about final invoices and reimbursement requests a couple months before the end of the year.
Great, thanks for that clarity, Paul. I do have another one. Do infrastructure planning activities have to result in increased housing production, or can it be used for rehab production, or inadequate infrastructure?
Sure, Paul, why don't you take this one?
Yeah, well, I'm excited about it, and I wonder if there's also some alignment with some disadvantaged communities or unincorporated areas. But I would say, to the extent that first of all, keep in mind that it isn't intended just to fund studies, so you need to be careful there. We want some sort of finished product, like a plan or whatever. But that is probably workable for one thing, to the extent that you're looking at maybe areas where there's inadequate infrastructure, and we're trying to improve that just for the existing residents. I think that works. I think there's probably there might be some new growth strategies as part of that, but part of accelerating housing production is holding on to what we got. So that's probably workable, but we certainly would love to discuss the idea.
And that ghostly voice you hear is Paul McDougall with HCD. I don't know that he was introduced earlier.
Oh yeah, every once in a while I just randomly come from the side and just blurt out some stuff. I'll try to control myself.
Great. I just have one more, I think, so far, and it's, will each COG be developing their own application process for local jurisdictions to apply for sub-allocations within the REAP application process?
Each COG will be developing its own process that may or may not involve an application. Again, it may be a competitive process. We know right now, we know of at least 2 COGs that do have a competitive process established that either has already been approved at its board level or is on the cusp of being approved, but not necessarily every COG will have an application process, although that does kind of stand to reason that you would want to apply in some fashion for the funds. But the specifics for all of that has not been made clear yet. We don't have that information at this time.
And it depends what county they're in. You need to contact the county. So every county is doing a floor fixed and competitive process. So every city gets a certain amount, and then they're putting the rest up competitively. So it just depends on your county.
Great, thanks. I think that's all for now, and we'll come back to Q&A in a little bit.
Thank you.
Great, thanks everybody. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about the statewide technical assistance that's available. Sohab, do you want to walk through some of the existing options before we get into the polling?
Sure, yeah. I can just do a high-level overview of the HCD TA program. Okay, so hi everyone, my name is Sohag Mahmood. I am with HCD. I lead the technical assistance program here on accelerating housing production. I want to kind of go through what the statewide TA program looks like, and also maybe to clarify how the statewide TA program will interact with some of the regional TA programs that are being developed right now, maybe even through REAP. So the state has a TA program on accelerating housing production. This was developed in about 2017, 2018 when we had the SB2 planning grants program. At the time, we were focused on providing technical assistance to all local governments to help them apply for and access the SB2 planning grants. As hopefully most of you are familiar with, you guys probably worked with Sarah Allender from PlaceWorks or ILG or one of us at HCD. We then followed that up also with a LEAP TA program that was done in-house, but also in partnership with PlaceWorks and ILG to make sure you got your LEAP grants. And so now that you've had your SB2 grants, your LEAP grants, you're working on the REAP funding, we are pairing a lot of those planning grants funding and trying to complement it with ongoing technical assistance. So really what this means is not only do we want to have these planning grant funding available for you, but we want to help you implement your planning grant funding and implement a lot of these housing policy areas over the next couple years. And so one way we're doing that is we're developing a regional technical assistance program. So we have been going throughout the state to talk to every region, every sub-region, or in this case, every COG, county, and to all the jurisdictions on what are your regional needs and how can HCD address them. So to do this, we actually have live polling that we're going to do in just a bit, where it's going to survey what are the regional needs for each of your COGs and what kind of tools, resources, checklists, fact sheets, workshops, education can we provide to help you address those regional housing needs. So we're really focused on a lot of the housing policy areas, everything from by right zoning to CEQA to infrastructure planning to housing element TA to implementing possibly pro-housing policies, and how can we help you implement those policies. Our role at HCD is really to help you throughout this process, to guide you, to provide any resources we can while you're not only implementing your planning grant activities, but helping you implement your REAP activities and just future housing policy activities. With that being said, the way we will be interacting with the San Joaquin Valley Regional TA program is we're working very closely with Robert and the San Joaquin Valley Working Group to make sure our resources and their resources are going to align together. So there might be areas where we identify that maybe this is work we can do versus maybe this is more work geared towards the COG, but we're going to be determining all of that through this survey polling. So it's very important that we get your answers today to then understand what are your needs and what can we do to help you. All of that feedback is then going to be turned into a TA plan for each of your COGs or counties. So that what that means is you have HCD developing a plan saying, this is what the region is identifying as their needs, and this is what HCD can commit to and help in addressing those needs. This is also going to be done through the PlaceWorks and ILG team. To clarify that, PlaceWorks and ILG, along with Ascent, are contractors under the HCD TA contract. So they're working on behalf of us to, again, implement these TA plans and help you address your regional needs. Next slide, please. So really quickly, just to recap, we had the SB2 Planning Grants Technical Assistance Program. That was really phase one of this overall TA effort. We provided direct assistance to over 400 jurisdictions. I'm sure you all probably know by now, over 90% of the state did apply through to the SB2 Planning Grant Program, and we did the same for the LEAP program as well. Next slide, please. So these are some statewide tools we'll be developing as a result of this technical assistance program. So I want to emphasize these are statewide tools, regardless of what the responses you give us today. These are tools that are going to be available for the entire state. What we're going to be polling you on today is really, what do you need that we can regionally customize, right? Because obviously the San Joaquin Valley is going to have a lot more differences in comparison to the Southern California region. And you have rural to urban jurisdictions with varying topography, and we want to make sure we account for a lot of these unique differences. But these are statewide tools that are being developed. We have a housing portal site that is about to be launched, hopefully in the next couple weeks. This is going to be a clearinghouse for all tools, best practices, checklists, and resources on a variety of housing policy topics. You can just visit HCD's website, click on a housing policy topic. Oh, I want to know more about by right zoning. How do I do that? Am I doing it right? Can I get some TA on it? You can click on that policy topic, and we should have checklists, guides, best practices on that particular topic. So it's your one-stop shop for everything. We're also working on approving model ordinances. I'm sure you probably already heard it by now. These are going to be ordinances on a variety of topics, ranging from reasonable accommodation to supportive housing to by right zoning. And it's a ordinance you can just download off of our website, plug in your city name, customize it if you would like, and then go ahead and start adopting it. Hopefully this is to kind of reduce the cost of constantly updating ordinances, as well as provide you some of that clarity about what the state is looking at when it comes to statute on these particular topics. We're also working on the CEQA site check tool with OPR. We have an objective standards how-to guide guidebook that's coming out right now, and we'll be working on a ADU toolkit. Next slide, please. So, like I said, we're moving into phase 2 of our technical assistance program. Phase 1 was providing you assistance to get your LEAP and SB2 planning grant applications in. Phase 2 is now really, what can we do to help the San Joaquin Valley? What toolkits can we create? What webinars can we develop? What workshops can we do? Do we need to do more one-on-one assistance with planners? Can we do things around public engagement? What are the tools that HCD can provide through HCD, through San Joaquin Valley, through its contracts with PlaceWorks and ILG to help you implement a lot of these housing policy efforts? Next slide, please. And now I will hand it over to Allison, who is from PlaceWorks on our TA team, who's going to walk you through the polling.
Actually, Sohab, sorry, this is Melissa. I'm going to be running the polling for Allison today.
Melissa, go ahead.
Just a couple of logistical pieces before we jump into this. First, as we start these polling questions, they may look familiar to some of you. There was a survey that was distributed that a number of you did participate in. So if the questions look familiar, that's why. If you did respond to that survey, still please feel free to respond today. That way we have all of the responses in one area for your region. But just wanted to flag that in case you're like, why am I answering these questions again? That's the first thing. Second, that we have a little bit of limitation with the polling setup. So some of these questions are going to be asked in more than one poll. So for example, you see all of the options here on the screen right now, but this question is going to be asked in 2 parts. So I just wanted to flag that for you. There's a little bit of wonkiness, and so I apologize for that. But we will have a slide that's attached to each of the questions. You'll be able to see all of the responses before you actually click on the answer to your poll. So this first one hopefully is pretty straightforward. We're just curious about which county your jurisdiction is in. So I'm going to go ahead and launch this first half. This one is again in 2 parts. So if you don't see your county on this first selection list, you will be on the second one. So we'll give this just a second. Hopefully you guys all see the poll pop up on your screen that has the different county options. I'll give this just a few more seconds here. It looks like you guys are getting the hang of it. If you're having any issues, please, again, as always, drop that into the questions or the chat box. We can help you through that. I'm going to go ahead and close this part. And then we're going to go ahead and launch the second piece of this, which hopefully is the rest of you all. We'll give this just a minute here. Okay, great. Thank you guys. That'll just help us break down the responses so that we make sure that your answers are corresponding to the appropriate COG. So now we're going to jump into some of the questions more directly related to the technical assistance options. So this is the first question we have. It'll be, what are the top 3 biggest challenges preventing your jurisdiction from increasing housing production? So I'm going to give you guys a second to look at these options here. Again, this one is going to come in 2 different chunks. So make sure that you have an idea of which ones you want to select. We'll launch the poll in just a few seconds here. Okay, I'm going to launch part 1. So please select, if any of the ones on the screen are in your top 3, please select those now. And you'll see the rest of the options in just a second when we launch the second half. Looks like most of you have responded, so we'll just give this another few seconds in case you're still making your selections. Great. I'm also going to share this with you guys just so that you can see kind of the breakdown of those responses so far. Obviously, there's a lot of challenges around developer interest and adequate infrastructure, followed by funding there. Not super surprising, things we've heard across the state. I'm going to launch the second half of this here. So if either of these are your biggest challenges, please select them now. We do ask that if you're selecting the other option, please share with us what that other challenge is, either in the chat box or the questions box, so we can make sure to capture that as well. Give this just another few seconds. Great. Okay. Quickly share that with you all. Obviously, you see limited housing site availability is a very large challenge for this region. So thank you for that. We'll make note of it. And then quite a few of you did also select that other option. So again, please share with us via chat or the questions box what those other challenges are. Okay, next up, we'd like you to select your top 3 areas for technical assistance. So which of these topics would be most helpful for you to receive technical assistance on? So take a look at these, and again, this one's going to come into, no, I apologize. This one's only one question, but if you do have that other option as one of your top 3, please go ahead and drop that information into the questions or chat box as well. So I'm going to go ahead and launch this one. About 2/3 of you have voted, so we'll give this just another few seconds. And again, if you have other requests, please type those in and share them with us. Go ahead and close this. I'm going to share that back out with you all as well, so you can see the breakdown here. I'm obviously looking for a lot of assistance with housing elements, with state financing, and with pro-housing designations. Great, thank you for that. So up next, we're hoping you can share with us which types of technical assistance would be most helpful. So you see the options here in terms of trainings and direct assistance, whether that's in one-on-one or small group meetings on specific topics, or if you are looking for more project management or administrative support, instructional guides, or planning documents and tools. And again, there's another option here. So same request if you have an other, please share that with us in the questions box. About 3/4 of you in. We'll give this just a few more seconds. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and close this one. Share these results with you too. So pretty split here, a lot of interest in sample planning documents and tools, and a lot of interest in training and direct assistance, but also pretty evenly split around project management and instructional guides. Okay, similar question, but again, which types of direct assistance would be most helpful to you? So it'll be more helpful to have one-on-one small group trainings or meetings, multi-jurisdictional workshops similar to this, where you can hear voices from across the region, an on-demand email or phone help desk to get more immediate responses to your questions, legal review or peer review of policies, plans, or ordinances, and obviously same request if you select other to please share with us what that is. Great. I'll show these to you. Really split on this one. A lot of interest in all of those different options. So this one is pretty long, so this one's going to be asked in 3 separate questions. So I'm going to give you all a chance to look over these different options here for a minute before we launch into the polls. But this technical assistance is directly related to any planning documents or tools. So which of these specific topics around planning documents and tools would be most helpful to you? And you see a number of options there, so take a look at those, and then we'll ask it in a few different parts. And thank you again for bearing with us. I know this is not the most streamlined approach, but very easy for us to gather all of this information while we have you all on the line instead of having to do individual surveys. So appreciate your humoring us on this front. All right, hopefully you've had a chance to read through all of those. I'm going to launch the first chunk of these. So with housing elements, general plan elements, by right development, objective design standards, or pro-housing policies, we're in your top 3 please select those now. Okay. Doesn't look to be adjusting much anymore, so I'm going to go ahead and close this section. I'm going to launch the next chunk of responses. So if specific plans, ADUs or garage conversions, collaboration with neighboring subregions, rezoning to by right, or innovative housing financing or fees were in your top 3, please select those now. Oh, would help if I actually launched it. I apologize. There we go. Hopefully you can see it now. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close this section. And then the final options here, if you were interested in expedited processing or, again, that other option, please again, share that with us in the questions box. But we'll give this just a few seconds here in case these two were in your top 3. Okay, thank you. Just a few more questions. This one, again, is pretty straightforward. Are you planning to hire a consultant for your 6-cycle housing element update? Yes, no, or undecided at this point. Okay, most of you have voted. Give this just another couple seconds. Okay. Share these responses with you. Majority of you are yes, planning to hire a consultant, and then 15% both say no and are undecided. I promise we're in the home stretch here. Just a couple more questions. So a lot of you obviously mentioned housing element updates as a technical assistance need. So what are some areas that HCD could provide more support for you for that housing element update? This one's also in 2 parts, so please take a second to take a look at those responses. Okay, I'm going to launch the first half of this. So if a needs assessment, sites inventory, review of past programs, new programs, or understanding new laws is in your top 3, please select those now. A lot of interest in understanding new laws and housing needs assessment coming through. All right, I'm going to close this section and we'll launch the second half. If you need help with public engagement strategies or again, other, please select those now. And obviously same request that if you select other to please share that with us. Seems to be a lot of interest in public engagement strategies, also not unique to your region. That seems to be an across the board need for a lot of local agencies. Okay, perfect, thank you. And this is the last one, I promise. So specifically talking about public engagement, since a lot of you just flagged that as a need, please share with us how the TA team could be supportive of helping you with public engagement. You'll see the options there, and then again, if you have something else, please share that with us in the questions box. But if you're having challenges conducting engagement during COVID, you need to build more community support, having trouble building support through your planning commission or your city council or board of supervisors, relationships with developers, or just having staff capacity challenges, please let us know. Most of you have selected, so we'll just give this a few more seconds. I'm going to go ahead and close this and just show you guys the responses. Obviously, a lot of support needed for conducting public engagement during COVID. Obviously, the digital environment is a little bit different than how you maybe normally engage your community. Having staff support to conduct meetings, so that staff capacity is obviously a big challenge for you all as well. So thank you again. I know that was a lot of questions, but we really appreciate your feedback, and this will definitely help us build the statewide technical assistance options as well as specifically for your region and your region's needs. In terms of next steps, Sohab, do you want to cover this, or shall we just quickly go through the timeline?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Really quick, just next steps and what we are going to be doing with all the responses you gave us. So all of this feedback that we gathered today is going to be put into a TA plan specific to your county or COG. So if you responded from the current area, then it will go into the current COG TA plan. It's basically a technical assistance delivery plan for how HCD, along with its partners, is going to deliver the TA resources to your area. With that, once we put that all into a preliminary plan, we're actually going to share it with Fresno COG, Michael and Robert, as well as all of you here today. We'll share that preliminary plan. We'll make sure we're on track with what you like, what this is what you want to see. Then that final plan will get shared with HCD. We're going to compare it across the board for the entire region. We'll see where we can find commonalities. For example, if the entire San Joaquin Valley and all of its COGs or counties are asking for housing element TA webinars, maybe we can do something for the entire region that can kind of achieve some economies of scale. And then we'll kind of see where there is more regional customization. From there, we'll determine a plan to allocate these resources. Hopefully starting in March, so just next month, and April, we'll determine how we can allocate those resources to each of these TA plans, and hopefully by May or early spring, we'll be deploying those TA resources. If you do have any questions about these TA plans and next steps, like I said, our entire team is here to help, but feel free to email any of our team members on the contact us slide that will be coming shortly. And back to you, Melissa.
Great, thanks, Sohab. And as she just mentioned, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to any of us on the team, and we can hopefully get you answers to those. So up next, we're going to hear from Mintier Harnish and Ramey and Associates about the more valley-wide, the valley-specific technical assistance that's coming. So Jim and Ron.
Well, great. Thank you. Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jim Harnish. I'm the principal and owner of Minter Harnish. And we, along with several teaming partners, have been selected to assist the San Joaquin Valley counties in a regional housing study. The team consists of Minter Harnish, Ramey and Associates, Rincon Consultants, Regional Government Services, and Veronica Tam. And Ron Whitmore with Ramey and Associates is going to give you a brief description of the components of this study. We can talk a little bit about how it's going to help the cities and counties in your housing planning efforts, and then talk about the timing and some of the community engagement that's a part of this. So with that, Ron, take it away.
Thank you, Jim, and thanks to all of our REAP partners and everyone who took the time today to learn more about REAP in the San Joaquin Valley. I'm Ron Whitmore, a principal with Ramey and Associates. I'm going to quickly walk you through the initial valley-wide efforts that Michael and Robert introduced. The output from this work effort is a report. If you could advance the slide, please. It's a report in 4 parts, which together should serve as a starting point for your local work on housing elements and for improving housing production across the valley. Part 1 of the report will be an existing conditions report that will provide a snapshot of conditions at the regional, sub-regional, county, and citywide level. The focus will be on housing element data sets like population and demographics, housing, including permitting, inventories, housing types, densities, affordability, and tenure, as well as economic data, jobs, income, and other market information. Part 2 will be a land use and housing element report. And in both the city and the county level, it will analyze the local housing regulatory context, including comprehensive and housing planning, infrastructure, zoning, codes and standards, incentives, development and other fees, as well as staff capacity. Part 3 will be an impediments to housing production report, and it will address topics like developer capacity, development profitability, adequate sites, infrastructure, absorption rates, funding barriers, and regulatory barriers. And finally, there'll be a best practices report designed specifically on approaches that have been proven to increase housing production. And that will capture best practices from the Valley as well as statewide and even nationally. Topics will likely include innovative zoning and design standards, connections among land use, transportation, water supply, and other infrastructure, infill strategies, co-benefits among housing, VMP reduction, and environmental justice outcomes, CEQA streamlining, funding sources, and other pro-housing policies and strategies. The final report will integrate the findings from each of these 4 parts into specific policy and strategy recommendations for improving housing production. Next slide, please. It is important that these work products be focused on people like yourselves who are in a position to accelerate housing production. So we'll be looking to you first for guidance on what will be most useful, and second, for local information and insight. To supplement the polling information collected today, early in the project, we'll use both interviews and surveys to learn more about issues, opportunities, and challenges, as well as to collect information specific to your jurisdiction. We also plan to host a round of workshops to brainstorm barriers, needs, and best practices. A few months later, after conducting our research, but before finalizing the reports, we'll host a second round of workshops for more focused discussions. So you and your colleagues will be hearing more from us soon. In the meantime, I'll hand things back to Melissa, who will facilitate the final Q&A.
Great, thank you. So as Ron just mentioned, we definitely still have some time for Q&A here before we close things out. So as you have been doing, please drop any questions you have into the questions box so we can see those and get you answers. Carly, do we have anything in the queue?
We do have one more question that came in. Frequently, we require project-by-project traffic studies for projects, which slows down the housing entitlement process. Would developing a traffic impact fee be acceptable use of REAP funds?
Why don't I let Paul McDougall take that one? Could you repeat that question one more time?
Sure. Frequently, we require a project-by-project traffic studies for projects, which sometimes slows down the housing entitlement process. Would developing a traffic impact fee be an acceptable use of REAP funds?
Well, for the sub-allocation, yes.
Okay, that was easy.
That's, no,
I do not have any other questions. I did record some other answers from the polling that was put into the chat box and the questions box. So we will go ahead and make sure that those are recorded and put into the regional technical assistance plans as others. We have some challenges, we had some comments as well, and we'll make sure that those are incorporated. But no other questions at this time.
Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and advance this slide with all of our contact information on it in case you need to jump off. But why don't we give folks just another minute or two to type in any questions if they have them before we jump off the line. But again, you see all of the team that's on the line today. Our email addresses are on this slide, so feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions about any of the moving pieces that we talked about today in terms of REAP, in terms of the ongoing technical assistance through SB2 and LEAP. Or anything that's coming your way in the Valley. So we'll leave this up for you all. Carly, let us know if you see anything come in. Otherwise, I'll open it up to the team for any closing thoughts as well.
We still have no other questions at this time.
Okay. Michael or Robert, any closing thoughts for the group before we close things out?
Well, I just want to say thank you for those who have invested the time and the effort to participate with us. We certainly plan to make good use of the information that you've provided today. We hope we've answered a lot of your preliminary questions. We understand that there are going to be a lot more yet to come, and we are happy to engage with you as much as necessary to make sure this process is successful. And we certainly want to thank our partners at HCD, PlaceWorks, ILG, everybody who helped make this webinar possible for all of us. Thank you, and we appreciate your resources.
And we'll be having more workshops in the future on other topics as well.
Great, so much. I do have just one more question from Christine Corrales. Can we confirm that the eligible REAP activities can be reimbursed dating back to the NOFA release date of February 26, 2020? It looks like she originally thought it was November 1st, 2019. So can we clarify that date?
I'd have to go check the NOFA date, but it was certainly around there, definitely back to early 2020.
Okay, so it looks like it is probably that February 26th, but we'll get confirmation for you, Christine, and send it your way.
Okay, well, if we don't have any more questions, I just also want to thank everybody on the line, especially for bearing with us through all the polling, but those responses will be really helpful to us as we develop those TA plans. So stay tuned for more, and just thank you so much for sharing part of your afternoon with us. Have a great evening.
Thank you.